So guys, in the most insane and not at all shocking turn of events, it looks like the left has been funding the very racism that they have been fighting against. But I have to say, before we get into this, I feel like this is just the perfect episode to follow up the one that we did yesterday, because reading all of this, watching all of these videos, it kind of made me feel bad for Kash Patel. Like, I'm not excusing any potential bad behavior, but no wonder The Atlantic dropped a massive hit piece on him right before this information came out, because I think they probably knew that within a matter of days, Kash would be standing behind a podium making a huge announcement that would destroy the left's entire victim narrative, and yet the entire press conference would be dominated by questions about his drinking, his Olympic men's hockey team partying, instead of the massive bomb that he and the DOJ just dropped. And that, my friends, is exactly what happened. And this just makes even more sense when you start to understand the connection between The Atlantic and the owner of The Atlantic and the organization that the FBI and the DOJ just exposed. And TLDR, guys, per usual, it looks like Alex Jones was right. All right, before we dive into this story today, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you've not already, and of course, ring that notification bell to stay up to date on every single thing we upload on the channel. All right, here we go. So the bombshell that Kash Patel and the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche dropped this week was that the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the organization that for more than 50 years has committed to fighting for social justice and against racism and against extremism and violence, has actually been funding that racism, that extremism, that civil injustice behind the scenes. Funny, isn't it?
You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
Now, this is what Kash said in his press conference.
The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. I just want to say that again. They used the fraudulently raised money by lying to their donor network, thousands of Americans, to go ahead and actually pay the leadership of these supposed violent extremist groups.
So they were telling the public, they were telling their donors that if you donate to us, the Southern Poverty Law Center, we will go in, we will fight against racism, we will dismantle these organizations. But what a grand jury indictment has found, what Kash Patel and the DOJ are unveiling, is that actually they were funding those exact organizations. But let's get specific. Look at this. Between 2014 and 2023, the SPLC secretly funneled more than $3 million in donated funds to individuals who were associated with various violent extremist groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Unite the Right, that's going to be an important one, National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations Affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Group, the National Socialist Party of America, which is the American Nazi Party, American Front, and so much more. And so now a federal grand jury has charged them with 11 counts of wire fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, conspiracy to commit concealment of money laundering. All right, so just think about this. I mean, first of all, it's just fraud upon fraud upon fraud. It seems like every level of our government, all of these nonprofits, they are just riddled with fraud. Like Americans are just having the wool, pulled over their eyes. Anyway, the SPLC, they are raising money. They promise their donors that it is going to be used to fight against the extremists, and then they fund the extremist groups, and then, wow, suddenly, very conveniently, they have more things that they need to fight against, and they need you to donate even more money to continue doing it. And the cycle continues. Now, honestly, Matt Walsh probably had the best tweet response to all of this. He said, this gives me new respect for Jussie Smollett. He bootstrapped his fake hate crime and paid for it himself rather than having the SPLC organize and fund it for him. Support your local mom and pop hate crime hoax operations before they're all put out of business by the big guys. It's just so perfect. All jokes aside, Matt's post actually brings up a really important point that none of this is really new. Like, people have used fake stories or hoaxes to get attention and gain a sort of, oppressive victim status for decades. Whether it is Jussie Smollett getting, beaten up by Trump supporters at 2 a.m. on the streets of Chicago, whether it is the Duke lacrosse boys who were falsely accused of rape, whether it is the custom Whole Foods cake from 20 2016 that allegedly was given to a man with a slur written on it. Spoiler alert, all of those people lied. But in the immediate aftermath, they got affirmation, they got attention and a certain victim status. People rallied around them to support and fight for them and fight against all of these various injustices, whether it was against women or black people or whatever it was. Like this meme right here is just so perfect. Obviously, it is the quintessential one from Mad Men, but they said, we pay people to be racist so we can fight racism. It's a clever business model. I gotta give it to them. Like, that was the strategy of the SPLC. Because if there is not enough racism and inequality to keep the doors open, you instigate it yourself.
Stop right now.
Now, to go even deeper here and to connect this to Trump and MAGA and modern politics on a whole, the SPLC was not just allegedly funneling money into these organizations through executives and random individuals, but they even helped these organizations and different individuals organize events. The most well-known being the Charlottesville riot of 2017, the riot that dramatically changed the political landscape as we know it today. The riot that changed tensions between Democrats and Republicans, the riot that helped the mainstream media indoctrinate the public into believing that conservatives and Donald Trump were all violent, racist, Nazis, and white supremacists. That Charlottesville rally. So in 2017, violence erupted in the college town of Charlottesville on August 12th after hundreds of white nationalists and their supporters who gathered for a rally over plans to remove a Confederate statue were met by counter-protesters, leading Virginia's governor to declare a state of emergency. Clashes broke out between the white nationalists. Okay, were they really white nationalists or were these, SPLC interns? Anyway, and the counter-protesters. The Unite the Right rally at a park once named for Confederate General Robert E. Lee was deemed unlawful. At one point in the afternoon, a vehicle drove into a crowd of counter-protesters marching through the downtown area before speeding away, resulting in one death and leaving more than a dozen others injured. State police later reported the crash of a helicopter that was monitoring the events in Charlottesville, killing 2 troopers. President Trump later addressed the violence in televised remarks from New Jersey, condemning an egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides, and calling for the swift restoration of law and order. And guys, this is where the fine people on both sides lie came from. This one event that was initially put together by the Unite the Right group, this one rally that turned into a violent riot, it had a massive ripple, a wave of effects in the trajectory of Trump and MAGA's political future. And guess who had a hand in every single part of it? None other than the SPLC. So here is a screenshot from this grand jury indictment. They are talking about one individual here that they have labeled F37. F37 was a member of the chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right event in Charlottesville, Virginia, and attended the event at the direction of the SPLC. This individual made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC and helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. Between 2015 and 2023, the SPLC secretly paid this individual more than $270,000.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people.
I feel like so much of politics is just a scene from a sitcom, but can you imagine these libs, with their piercings and their blue hair, they're all huddled around a computer being like, yes, let's be white supremacists today. Ooh, say this, let's be Nazis. It is just so, it's comical. It is so embarrassing, it is comical, but it is also disgusting because they put this violence out into the world. They led the public to believe that normal Republicans and conservatives and Trump voters were like this. They created, thanks to these individuals, their fake personas, their fake social media accounts, they created a caricature based on violent extreme individuals. And so the SPLC was paying someone nearly $300,000 who directly helped plan this event and then escalate tensions. This is not alleged, this is a fact in this indictment. And it is so crazy, but you know what? It obviously seems like this was an investment that paid off because it gave the left talking points for years and years to come. According to Biden, Charlottesville, that riot, it was his inspiration for running in 2020. Just listen.
I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017. Extremists coming out of the woods, carrying torches, their veins bulging from their necks, carrying Nazi swastikas, and chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that was heard in Germany in the early 30s. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, so emboldened by a president then in the White House, that they saw as an ally.
Emboldened by a president in the White House. Biden, I think you actually mean they were emboldened by fake racist posts made by an SPLC instigator. They were emboldened by $300,000 worth of event planning and escalated tensions. I think that is actually who emboldened them. Thank you very much. But moving on from that point, 4 years later, Kamala Harris in her campaign was still parroting the exact same points from that one event.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
I mean, this one is possibly even more egregious because by 2024, we know that what the media said about Trump and his comments was false. That is not what Trump was saying. That is not what he meant. And yet she is sitting there parroting the exact same lie. She's sitting there endorsed by the SPLC. You can see on Trump's face, he's like, seriously? 8 years later, I'm dealing with the same BS. I'm sure he knows that it's a hoax. I mean, it's just so insane and so egregious. And it's almost like instigating an event of that size and then peddling hoaxes and lies in the media based on that event was kind of the entire plan. Again, they put in $300K and they got fodder for a lifetime. And you know what? Alex Jones called it. He called it from the very beginning, all the way back in 2017, right after it happened, literally in August of 2017. He said that this was an inside job, as you can see right here. And this was his take.
Charlottesville was mainly a bunch of homosexual leftists dressing up like Nazis who'd all formerly worked for Obama or Hillary, part of their art club. And then they lured a bunch of reporters there and some real white supremacists so the police could stand down and collide them into the folks. I pointed out that some of the same leftist foundations are funding the white supremacists that are funding real white supremacists in Ukraine. I got sued for that. And I said it was all part of leftists coming out to come to this big event and hope there was some big crisis out of it to demonize the right in general and tie us to Nazis.
And when he says that they were hoping that some crisis would come out of it, it reminds me of that normal political phrase, like never let a crisis go to waste. And we can apply that to, COVID or anything else where they use a crisis and then they use that to take away more of our freedoms, to tax us more, to make themselves richer. The same thing could be said for this. But you know what? The SPLC, they are apparently empowered individuals. They didn't just want to wait for a crisis. No, they wanted to manufacture one because, again, there was not enough extremism to go around, not enough racism, so they were concocting it up in their little cauldron. And now Alex Jones was ending that little segment on his show by saying, this is ongoing. We are not supposed to be questioning this narrative. But you know what? He was right. We should have questioned it just like you should be questioning modern healthcare, which is why you need my friends at Jevity. Now, something that has always been so wild to me is that we spent so much time in school learning how to solve for X or analyze a great novel, which obviously you guys know I love. It's all good and well. But we missed out on so many practical skills, like being able to actually understand what is going on in our bodies, what is actually healthy, and what is just a lie peddled by big pharma or big food. Now, thankfully, it is not too late to learn. My friends over at Jevity offer the class that we all should have had, except it is built around your individual body. Through an easy at-home blood test where a phlebotomist literally comes to your home, they test over 100 biomarkers, and then they walk you through exactly what it all means. Then you get a dedicated care team that translates your results into a real plan that fits your life. Supplements literally created for you around your data, plus lifestyle, fitness, and nutrition advice that can take your body and your health to the next level. It is like finally getting the owner's manual for your own body and what is actually going on. I wish somebody had told me about this so many years ago, so I am telling you now, you need Jevity. Go to gojevity.com/Brett Cooper. Use code Brett for 20% off your membership. Again, that is gojevity, gojevity.com/Brett Cooper. Take back your health today. Use code Brett for that 20% off discount. Now back to the story and back to questioning the mainstream narratives. Obviously, Alex Jones did question it. And 10 years later, he and so many others were vindicated, like the late Scott Adams, may he rest in peace, for example, who said this.
If your job is to identify ghosts, are you going to find any ghosts? Of course you will, because you get paid for it. If your job is to identify hate groups, are you going to find some new hate groups every year? Or are you going to find all the ones that exist, and then you say, we don't even need any funding for the next year. I don't even know why we have a staff. We found all the hate, and we did our map, so maybe we'll check back in a year to update it. No, They're going to find some extra hate.
They're going to find the extra hate. And again, if they're not going to find it, they are going to create it. In the nonprofit world, if you want to keep attention, if you want to keep funding, keep all of the high executive salaries that allow them to buy all the fancy cars and the big houses when they're, CEOs of a, ending homelessness charity, you have to be continuously finding problems or maybe even creating problems that you then have to raise money to solve. It is common sense. However, that piece of common sense, it is not so logical to the left. And they are officially in full meltdown over this whole indictment. And their rationality for everything that is coming out is that the SPLC was simply paying informants. So this can't be a crime. They were just sending people in to just find the hate. They weren't instigating anything. God, no, they were just trying to better understand and better know these extremists. Like, for example, one person tweeted and said, to be clear, Trump's FBI is going after the SPLC because they infiltrated and exposed the same dangerous right-wing extremist groups that so many Trump allies are associated with. And then the SPLC themselves said these individuals that they were paying, the, F-30, F-37, whoever we talked about, these individuals risked their lives to infiltrate and inform on the activities of our nation's most radical and violent extremist groups. When we began working with informants, we were living in the shadow of the height of the civil rights movement, which had seen bombings at churches and state-sponsored violence against demonstrators and the murders of activists that went unanswered by the justice system. They vowed that the SPLC will vigorously defend themselves, their staff, and their work. And my response to that is, what information were you genuinely getting from an informant who was planning events and instigating violence by posting racist content online? Like, was there not enough real racism for you all to react to? Your informant actually couldn't find enough, so we had to go out and post more of it that you could talk about. Like, what information were you getting, for example, from the KKK member who was the leader of the Aryan Nations group, leader of a neo-Nazi group, who was listed on your website as an extremist? You were paying him $70K to do what? To lead an extremist organization, 3 extremist organizations, to sow more violence and division in the world? Got it. That's real innocent. That's so innocent.
I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
You were just trying to get information. I mean, I call bullshit. We can obviously see right through this. Now, I actually did find some footage of this man after the first check hit his bank account.
As I was saying, she packed up her bag and left. It was all very sudden.
Well, do you know where Mika is right now?
As you know, she's always been very...
I mean, it is just too perfect. Now, somebody else said, paying the KKK to act up because the supply of racism doesn't actually meet your demand for it is possibly the most libtarded move of all time. Exactly. Now, bringing this all back to Cash Patel, good old sweet cash money that we talked about yesterday in regards to his hit piece, the chips do seem to be falling into place. He got slapped with his hit piece from The Atlantic conveniently right before this indictment came out. And interestingly, this is just a little extra factoid, the owner of The Atlantic, Laureen Powell, has a close relationship with the Southern Poverty Law Center. She is one of their big donors, and actually donating to them when she was a young person was her first philanthropic endeavor. And she credits them with getting her into politics and journalism to begin with. And now, Miss Powell is the head of a huge, anonymous philanthropic organization that still has close ties to the SPLC. So I'm just kind of connecting the dots here because, again, the timing just seems very convenient for the mainstream media and for The Atlantic and for the SPLC. Like, I would not be surprised at all if this hit piece was timed so the Cash, exposing the SPLC would be overshadowed by all of these accusations. And it worked, honestly, because the most viral videos that have come out of the press conference with him and Todd Blanche talking about the SPLC, like the majority of the questions were about Cash and his drinking, were about the article from The Atlantic, like this.
Well, I do want to give you an opportunity to respond directly to the allegations in the Atlantic article that your unexplained absences created a national security risk. And beyond that, can you say definitively that you have not been intoxicated or absent during your tenure as FBI director?
I can say unequivocally that I never listen to the fake news mafia. And as when they get louder, it just means I'm doing my job.
Now listen, I know that Cash Patel has been backed into a corner here, but saying I don't listen to the fake news is really not a great way to convince the public that you have not been drunk at work. It seems like maybe you're a little scared to say that you haven't been because maybe you have been. Maybe you were on the clock when you were with the men's hockey team. I don't know, just saying. But the point being, him saying that did not go over well. Like, the entire thing just dissolved into chaos. When he was trying to make points about the SPLC, when he was trying to talk about fraud and corruption, the supply of racism not being enough for the demand, it all just went back to The Atlantic.
When we are here to talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center's $3 million decade-long scheme to fraudulently fleece Americans. You are off topic.
It's a simple, straightforward question. Did you talk to anybody about whether you thought
The
you were
simple
fired?
answer to your question is you are lying. And every time you do so, I've answered your question. It's simply as follows. I was never locked out of my systems. Anybody who says
Your lawsuit says the opposite. Your lawsuit contests.
anyone that says the
Your lawsuit-
opposite
your-
is lying.
The lawsuit
Thank you.
that you filed says that directly.
Man, stop. You're being extraordinarily rude.
And you know, the thing is, like, neither party looks great here. I know that Blanche and Patel are just trying to do their jobs, but they are kind of bumbling and stumbling over each other. They're not really getting control of the room. The journalists are not staying on track. They are only wanting to talk about the accusations against Patel, which is just so dishonest, but honestly completely predictable because they would rather talk about that instead of what their own party is doing. But I will say, I feel for Cash, I feel for Todd Blanche, and I understand that they were frustrated because this is a big win for the FBI and the DOJ and the Trump admin. Like, Chris Rufo took the words out of my mouth here. He tweeted this and he said, I have been vocal in my criticism of Cash Patel. I certainly have. Certainly. It's probably not the last time. But this SPLC indictment is the first glimmer of hope that the FBI is seriously addressing the threat of organized left-wing criminality, violence, and terrorism. More of this is needed. And that is like the understatement of this entire presidential term. Like, this is what people voted for. This is what people have wanted, especially in the wake of Charlie's assassination. They are desperately looking for answers, especially as journalists like my friend Savannah Hernandez are getting accosted and attacked in the streets and nothing is done. And her attackers are just roaming free, especially as people like Nick Shirley and James O'Keefe and Cam Higbee, amazing other journalists, continue to expose corruption on corruption and fraud and fraud. We want these people held accountable. Representative Jim Jordan posted this and he said, SPLC equals fraud. Act Blue equals fraud. California Medicare equals fraud. Minnesota daycares equal fraud. Fire aid equals fraud. What is next? Justice! Justice is what hopefully is next. That is what we all want. So hopefully what we are seeing here is not just more empty words with no consequences. We want action. We want accountability. That is what should be next. But only time will tell.